Today, in this press conference, I am urging the federal government on behalf of the Green Party caucus to uphold its obligations to the international community. The work of defending human rights, advancing climate action, and promoting stability between nations cannot be set aside during this public health crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that we have the ability to take decisive collective action and to make personal and collective sacrifices in order to protect the most vulnerable among us. We must apply that same urgency and political courage to the climate crisis. Despite dramatic declines in pollution levels globally, the atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases continue to rise. The Green Party is disturbed by comments from the Environment and Climate Change Minister, Jonathan Wilkinson, that key climate commitments and other long overdue regulations will be delayed. Climate action cannot be kicked down the road to be dealt with later. We are in this crisis because action has been deferred for decades. Our children and our grandchildren do not have voting rights, but they will have to live with the results of our insufficient action to address climate change. The climate crisis poses a threat to Canadians that is far more severe than COVID-19. It is a slower moving, but a much larger looming catastrophe. In 2016, Canada signed on to the Paris Agreement. That agreement requires us to dramatically improve our target for reducing greenhouse gas emissions within calendar year 2020. That's this year. The decision to postpone the planned climate negotiations in Glasgow, the COP26, until next year does not change the requirement for Canada to improve our target in 2020. Setting this new target does not require legislation. Moving forward and fulfilling the commitment Canada made when we signed on to the Paris Agreement will send a strong and positive message to Canadians and to the international community. Canada must show international leadership on human rights. While the world is focused on the COVID-19 pandemic, human rights abuses continue to occur and in some cases escalate due to a lack of scrutiny. It is very concerning that the federal government lifted the moratorium on the arms exports to Saudi Arabia last month. Saudi Arabia has been accused of war crimes in the conflict in Yemen. There is evidence of Canadian-made light armored vehicles being used there. Saudi Arabia has a well-documented record of human rights abuses against women, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and religious minorities within its own borders. There have been reports of Canadian-made LAVs being used in the repression of Saudi Arabia's Shia minority. And I would be remiss not to mention the brutal murder of dissident Saudi journalist and Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi inside a Saudi consulate in Istanbul just a year and a half ago. We believe that selling military equipment to dictatorial regimes that routinely engage in human rights abuses is not something that Canadians support. We strongly urge the federal government to reinstate the moratorium on arms exports to Saudi Arabia. The Green Party is also calling on the federal government to oppose Israel's plan to illegally annex settlements in the West Bank. On May 8th, the three members of the Green Party caucus wrote a letter to Prime Minister Trudeau urging the government to take a strong stance against any annexation of Palestinian lands, which would be a clear violation of international law, the Geneva Convention, and UN Security Council Resolution 242. Israel's new coalition government has signaled its intent to annex significant parts of the occupied Palestinian West Bank, including parts of the Jordan Valley. Taking this action would jeopardize Israel's quarter-century-old peace treaty with Jordan and destabilize the government of Jordanian King Abdullah II, who is already facing internal pressures. Canada must not stand idly by and allow the Netanyahu government to violate international law with impunity. Prime Minister Trudeau has repeatedly affirmed his support for a two-state solution. Most recently, this past December, during the lighting of the menorah on Parliament Hill, an event that I had the pleasure of attending myself. The Green Party urges the federal government to raise this matter with Canada's international partners and pressure the Netanyahu government to back down from this dangerous plan. We all share a desire to have a secure and peaceful existence for ourselves and for our children. COVID-19 has renewed a vision of a collaborative, caring, and compassionate Canada, one where we take care of the vulnerable among us and make sacrifices for the greater good. In supporting international efforts to uphold the rights and dignity of all people, we support dignity for ourselves. Working together for a livable climate is a challenge we must run towards and embrace, not hesitate and shy away from. By embracing the challenge wholeheartedly, we can begin to create the more resilient communities and the more compassionate society where our grandchildren will thrive, where they will continue to take care of each other, of Canada, and of the world. Thank you.
We'll now go to question period. We remind you to keep it one question, one follow-up. We'll start with three questions on the phone. Operator, do we have our first question?
There is no questions registered at this time.
I'll come back to you later. Julie, do you have a question?
Julie, CBC News. Mr. Manley, first of all, did you fly here? And I'm wondering how you see Parliament reconvening on Monday, if there's no kind of arrangement. You know, the deal is that 338 MPs would fly here. I'm not sure if you've been here for a while. Did you fly in? Did you find it safe? Would it be safe for that to happen? What are your views?
Well, I've flown back. I came here for the April 20th sitting, and it took me 2 days to get here from Vancouver Island flying. The airports were empty. I walked around with a mask on and listened to announcements every 10 minutes that I needed to stay away from people and keep my physical distance. And then it took me 16 hours gate to gate to get home. On the way back out here, I hitched a ride with the defense minister on the Challenger jet because he was flown back out to BC to spend time with his family on the weekend for Mother's Day. And he had been here the whole time, and Elizabeth May had flown back on the Challenger, and so I was able to thankfully get a ride with them. I am heading back to British Columbia tomorrow because Jenica Atwin is coming to do her stint in Parliament for the next 4 weeks. She's moving here with her family. Because otherwise, if she came here and then went back to New Brunswick, she would have to self-isolate away from her family. And so this way, if they all go back to New Brunswick in late June, they'll self-isolate together. We don't know what's happening Monday yet, and I think that we need to work out some kind of a deal because the idea of 338 members of Parliament showing up here on Monday is not a good idea. Whether we're all wearing masks or not, the distance between people in Parliament is, there is no distance. You're sitting right beside people, right in front of people, right behind people. And we need to model good behavior. We could very well be disease vectors if we all get together like that and spread this across the country, because we're, traveling in our constituencies, getting groceries, doing whatever else we need to do in our daily lives. And if we all come together and reconvene like that, it's not a smart situation. I think that the virtual parliaments have been working fairly well. What we need is a system for voting, and we are one of the jurisdictions in the world that doesn't have a system that allows that. And I think even for people who are really sick, who crawl out of their beds to come here to vote during normal times, we need a system where their votes can count, where they're not having to drag themselves out of their hospital beds to come and take part in Parliament and represent their communities. So we need to be looking at these systems and that other parliaments have used. And I think a mixed parliament is something that that Proc has been talking about, where part of it will be brought in online. That's what the UK Parliament is doing. So part of it is online, and part of it is physically in the room. Just want to say that I've actually found the lack of heckling quite refreshing. I thought for a little while that everybody was elected Green in Parliament because I signed a pledge saying that I would not heckle. I would obey the rules of the House of Commons, the standing orders, which say that you cannot interrupt anybody else when they're speaking. And so it felt like a Green Parliament for a little while. We've gotten back to seeing some MPs heckle, and in fact heckling online. But when they do that online, they pop up on the monitor, and you can see who in fact is heckling. But I do think it's working, and I think I'm in on the committee meetings, and I see the government being held to account, the ministers being questioned, the witnesses being questioned, and I think that there's a lot of effectiveness to that, and I think that the members of Parliament in the opposition parties and in the Liberal Party have brought forward a lot of different issues to the government regarding gaps in the relief programs, and have done that effectively. So we've seen the government being very responsive to the needs of constituents and Canadians and the issues that are brought forward by MPs. And I see it as a very Team Canada effort, working together, and it's working at this time. And bringing everybody together, 338 members of Parliament, does not make sense. I don't think anybody's actually advocating for that, just advocating for more time in Parliament and to be able to debate other issues. Part of the problem with having the sessions that are committees of the whole on COVID-19 means that we need to talk about COVID-19, and there are other issues that we need to be discussing in the House of Commons.
Okay, so, and I guess obviously it's got to be sorted out in the next couple of days. But now on another matter, have you spoken to Elizabeth May about the rumblings in the party that have gone public about their allegations that she's trying to consolidate her leadership, get her husband on the council? There's been, rumblings that have become stories. Have you spoken to her about it? Have you advised her about what she should do?
I talk to Elizabeth about all kinds of things all the time, but I've had discussions with Elizabeth about federal council and about the leadership race and things like that. But yeah, those are my personal discussions with Elizabeth.
In the stories, are they damaging the party in any way?
I'm not sure that they're damaging the party. I think there's always different things that happen with political parties that come and go.
We'll check on the phone again, see if we have a question. Operator?
Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Appuyez sur étoile 1 pour poser une question. There are no questions registered. Il n'y a pas de questions enregistrées.
Thank you. Julie, do you have
Can
another
I just
question?
ask you to elaborate on what should be done regarding Israel's position on the West Bank in terms of the annexation? The Prime Minister did have conversations with Netanyahu this week. What exactly do you want Canada to do, the Canadian government?
Well, I think the Canadian government needs to take a strong position on this and a publicly strong position on this, the same way that the UK Parliament and the French Parliament have, and the EU has. I think that we need to. Israel is a friend. They're an ally of Canada, and in the same way that you don't let friends drink and drive, you don't let friends break international law, and you need to be clear about that, and very firm about that, and that's what Canada needs to do, is follow the example of other countries.
Why do you think the government hasn't done that?
I'm not sure. I think it's a sensitive topic, discussing Israel and Palestine in this country. You might know that from my own background, that it's not an easy thing to bring up, even when it's just your parents that are talking about it. So I think that that's maybe why there's some caution there.
Okay.
I'll check one more time on the phone, see if we have a question.
I'm always happy to answer your questions, Julie.
There are no questions registered at this time.
Perfect. This concludes the press conference. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.